Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's now 7:06 of all times. Look at that. What a great time it is, 7:06. One of my favorites. It's O'Connor and Company on this Wednesday morning. It's Larry O'Connor with a special appearance by Patrice Onwuka this morning because Julie Gunlock and I are on the road. We're in Scranton. There is no Dunder Mifflin experience, though, that I've seen yet. I'm going to search for it.
Oh, really? You haven't seen Michael?
No.
The other famous Michael.
Dwight's everywhere. We are here to launch the bus tour for Independent Women's Forum's attempt to save Title IX and protect women's sports.
Yes.
Paula
Very
Scanlon
important.
is part of that with Riley Gaines and Betsy DeVos and many others. Paula Scanlon is going to be joining us at 8:35. And at 8:05, former Trump attorney Jesse Benall is going to join us. Right now, though, we're joined by Shawn Carney. He is the CEO and president of 40 Days for Life. And Patrice, we saw the story of Mark Houck. Mark Houck was arrested by the Justice Department. This is after local Philadelphia police and the local Philadelphia district attorney decided he had done nothing wrong. But the Justice Department decided to have an early morning FBI raid to arrest him for, really for praying on a sidewalk in front of an abortion mill in Philadelphia. He was acquitted, thank God. And as all of us watched this transpire before our eyes, we thought to ourselves, how can they get away with it? How can the federal government do this to an innocent person? What's going to happen to them? Why don't they pay a penalty? Well, Shawn Carney, you and your client, Mr. Houck, who has been through all of this, you are now trying to make the Justice Department and the federal government pay a penalty. Tell us about what you're doing.
Yeah, well, we're suing them. We have wonderful attorneys who work for 40 Days for Life and other attorneys from across the country, a former DOJ attorney who left the DOJ to help with this specific case. And we're suing. You know, you can't just sue the federal government, but you can when it has to do with civil rights, with liberty. And so that's what we're doing. We have a very strong case. You know, you gave a great little summary of what happened to Mark. And, you know, all of this has this awkward, preface, which is when he was the subject of a federal investigation, our lawyers on Mark's behalf sent a letter to the DOJ saying he would turn himself in. I mean, Mark's never committed a crime. He doesn't own a gun. And he has no prior. So he offered to turn himself in. We have not found, I've never even heard of any raid. No FBI agent or DOJ official has ever heard of a guy getting raided who offered to turn himself in. It's unprecedented.
So what is this lawsuit going to look like? What are the damages? And my only frustration here is I don't understand why there isn't any criminal behavior here. When the federal government can do this to somebody, and yet everyone involved with this, from the person who came up with the idea to press these charges, who got the warrant from a judge, to the FBI agents who went ahead and saluted dutifully and followed orders, knowing they had to know that this was dirty, that this was wrong. Why is nobody held accountable beyond just, I mean, let's face it, they print money like it's going out of business. You could win a $20 million lawsuit or a $50 million lawsuit or a $100 million lawsuit against the federal government. It means nothing to them. It's not going to change their behavior.
Well, that's actually a good technical point. You can't do that because it's the federal government, because it's tax money. So there is a cap on what you can sue. You can't sue them for $3 trillion and say, give me, just go more into debt. And so there is a cap, but it is a civil case. It's the way these cases work. Mark has a great case. There were many men and women in law enforcement who refused to go on that raid, and it wasn't because their kid had a dentist appointment. And so discovery will be very, very revealing. And someone ordered this, and we're going to get to the bottom of all that, of how this came about. Your opening statement was correct, and it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with abortion. We have many liberals who disagree with our mission, with what we do, but they're supporting us because I don't want abortion doctors raided. I don't want Planned Parenthood workers raided. this is America. We have public
Yes.
discourse. We agree, we disagree, but we don't raid each other's homes because one of us has political power and the other doesn't. And so I think that that is what makes this case so strong and why it's getting so much attention.
Yeah. Shawn, we're speaking with Shawn Carney, CEO and president of 40 Days for Life. You know, when you look at Mark Houck's case and just generally how the Department of Justice is treating pro-life advocates, is this unique to this presidency, to this administration, or have we seen this kind of behavior span recent presidencies or historically other presidencies? Because I can't go back too far in my recollection, but I don't remember any other DOJs prosecuting pro-life advocates the way the Biden administration seems to be. Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% right. And it hasn't even been the Biden. It's been since Roe v. Wade was overturned under Biden. 40 Days for Life, you know, we're the largest pro-life organization in the world. We have vigils in 1,700 cities. We started in 2007. We had no problem. We've worked very closely with the DOJ through Bush, Obama, Trump, and even the first year of Biden. We need the DOJ and the FBI. There's a lot of lunatics out there, and they've helped protect us. Along with local law enforcement. So the first thing the 40 Days for Life leader is trained to do is to meet with local law enforcement. And occasionally that may lead to federal law enforcement because they're the good guys. And then when Roe was overturned, it's just like a target was put on our back. At one point, we were getting 1 to 2 inquiries a week from the FBI. And when we filed our notice of claim back in November, telling them we were going to sue them on behalf of Mark Houck, that ceased immediately. And so we have to fight back, and we are, and it's a good case, it's a strong case, and I think it represents really all Americans and our right to free speech.
And it represents an incredibly dark day in American history that is very recent history that we need to focus on as it develops before our eyes. You mentioned something that I really want to drill down on, that you are aware of and have identified FBI agents who refuse to participate in that raid. That can't be a common occurrence amongst the rank and file. Can you tell us more about that and what those conversations looked like?
Yeah, well, there were law enforcement agents that refused to go on the raid, and we're going to subpoena them, and we're going to talk to them. And we're going to see where this came from. I mean, when Mark's wife asked for the warrant, she said, "Do you have a warrant?" She was told by one particular gentleman, "Mark is coming with us with or without a warrant." Mark actually himself was never shown the warrant. And typically, a lot of our law enforcement, a lot of our attorneys are former law enforcement, and they've done raids. And, you know, the typical thing is you actually put it on the barrel of the gun. You put the warrant. So literally it's the first thing the person sees. It's very standard, you know, protocol. Mark actually never saw the warrant. They eventually did show his wife the warrant after Mark was gone. But they hauled him to the U.S. Marshal's office and chained him to a table in a room alone for 6 hours like he was part of Al-Qaeda. It's unbelievable what they did to this guy. And then he's acquitted, and it's like, well, sorry, bro.
Yeah.
And that's just
no hard feelings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you for bringing this up and championing this lawsuit on behalf of Mark Houck, and really on behalf of pro-life protesters. I'm guessing with this jihad we've seen against pro-life demonstrators who are really just praying in front of these abortion mills, and the arrests and the convictions we've seen, has it put a damper on any of these activities? Are you finding people are reluctant to show up now and pray a rosary to save these babies and to bring assistance to these women in crisis?
That's a great question. Initially, yes, when Mark was first raided, but honestly, we've grown. We've grown significantly since the overturning of Roe, and I think this has not overall served as a deterrent for our mission. We've only added more cities, more volunteers. We expanded our legal team to protect ourselves, and that helps. But we have grown significantly since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and that has shown that, you know, the pro-life movement was really ready for the overturning of Roe in the grassroots a part of our movement.
Excellent. Thank you so much, sir.
Terrific.
I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
That's Shawn Carney. He's the CEO and president of 40 Days for Life. And we're going to keep praying for Mark Houck, for his family, and hopefully justice will be served in this case.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Miss anything? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Get today's breaking news on the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6, right here on WMAL.
The Biden-Harris campaign announced yesterday that they would hold a press conference in front of the Manhattan courtroom where Donald Trump has been facing. This was yesterday, and it said, Biden-Harris campaign with special guests. And it turned out the special guest was actor Robert De Niro and two of the police officers from the January 6th committee hearings. And, boy, it was a scene, man. It was a scene. Do you want to hear a little bit of Bobby De Niro doing his best
the clown show?
driving?
Yeah, let's hear about the clown show.
All right, here is. Let's start with cut 17. This is Robert De Niro showing up. He's wearing a mask, by the way. He's the only one in the entire island of Manhattan wearing a mask. So that tells you how sort of off center he is. Here's cut 17.
I feel at home in these streets. I feel comfortable. The Twin Towers fell just over here. Just over there. This part of the city was like a ghost town. But we vowed we would not allow terrorists to change our way of life. And we started the Tribeca Festival to bring people back.
He goes on. He tells this long story about how Donald Trump, back 20 years ago, had pretended to be his own publicist, which who knows. The point is, Robert De Niro is living in the past. He's now talking about, what's going to happen here. Here's cut 20, where Robert De Niro, on behalf of the Biden-Harris campaign, warns Americans what would happen if Donald Trump wins the election.
Under Trump, this kind of government will perish from the earth. I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. You know that. He will never leave.
Well, he said it 3 times, so it's got to be true, Patrice. He's been watching too much Morning Joe.
Yeah, I mean, boy. If this was the best actor that they could find to be the best surrogate for the campaign, they're really hard up right now. He apparently is the face of a new campaign ad, and there's a new turn or a new phase of the campaign where they're going to be getting more aggressive, and it's centered around the issue of protecting democracy. And so he, I guess, is the face of the valiant warrior for democracy. I got to say, listening to him, it reminded me of one of my favorite funny movies that he was in, Meet the Fockers. And no, I didn't curse. I promise you I did not.
No, we know.
But he couldn't articulate a positive vision for why Americans should give President Biden 4 more years. He couldn't talk about any substantive issues. He couldn't talk about any issues at all. All he could do is call people President Trump names like tyrant and call Trump supporters names like clowns, which, by the way, is what Kathy Hochul called Trump supporters too. So, the Biden administration is hard up, and they were scraping the barrel with him, frankly.
Well, he couldn't articulate those positive things about Biden, but neither can Biden, actually. This is all they have. But this was actually a bit of a poker tell. This is basically the other guy blinked in this stare down. In cut 21 here, you'll hear Jason Miller, spokesperson for the Trump campaign, sort of call them out on what this really meant, this press conference with Robert De Niro. Listen.
So the Biden folks have finally done it. After months of saying that politics had nothing to do with this trial, they showed up and made a campaign event out of a Lower Manhattan trial day for President Trump. In fact, Biden's cronies had a printed out campaign sign saying Biden-Harris. So why the change? Why is Joe Biden now making this a campaign event after months of weaponizing the legal system against President Trump? because Joe Biden's numbers are in the tank. The headline for today in Politico very simply said, Dems in freak out over Joe Biden. Joe Biden is losing nationally. He's losing in every single battleground state. And President Trump's numbers continue to rise. And the best that Biden can do is roll out a washed-up actor. And don't worry, my remarks will be shorter than the Irishman. I won't make you suffer for 3 hours.
Yeah,
but
all
the
right,
best they can do is roll out a washed-up actor.
All right. Well, to be fair, Robert De Niro is not washed up. He's still a fine actor, and he still sells tickets at the box office. But everything else is true. They said that this is about criminal justice and about law and order and about breaking the law. And they made this is literally a campaign event. So they're campaigning on the trial. So you can't tell me it's not political.
Exactly. And it's an embarrassment, but that's all they've got.
Yep. Meanwhile, Kash Patel real fast on Tim Pool's podcast, Cut 24. Michael, if you could, listen to this.
Because the judge in this case and the prosecutors know that they'll never publicly admit, if they jail Donald Trump, he's going to win overnight. Mm-hmm. If Donald Trump is found guilty, which because it's a rigged system, there's a likelihood that he might, they are going to have to allow Donald Trump to stay out on bond while he appeals this bogus trial. Otherwise, this country is going to go nuts.
Yeah, it is, and as well it should, by the way. All right, we'll give you more on the trial and more news as the day develops. It's 7:24.
Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:36. It's O'Connor and Company here on this Wednesday morning. Coming up, we got you covered on all the major stories of the day to get you ready to tackle whatever you need to tackle. Starting at 8:05, Jesse Benall is a former attorney for Donald Trump. We're going to spend quite a bit of time with him sort of breaking down in an analytical way exactly what arguments were made yesterday in the final day of the trial and what the jury is now expected to do based on what appears to be a crime that was never actually proven. But does that even matter at this point? We'll get into it. Also at 8:35, Paula Scanlon, a athlete with a woman swimmer who is trying to protect women's sports. She is in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So am I, by the way, as we kick off a bus tour for Independent Women's Forum trying to protect women's sports from liberals and from the Biden administration. So that's all coming up. It's Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka today, a rarer Wednesday appearance from Patrice Onwuka. Joining us right now is Andrew Morris. He's the Senior Litigation Counsel for New Civil Liberties Alliance to discuss something that's happening under the radar. And we like to draw the focus on things like this and put the spotlight on stuff the government is doing that infringes on our rights because, well, no one's paying attention. You are, though, Andrew Morris. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Patrice. Thanks for having me.
So what exactly is the Consolidated Audit Trail from the Securities and Exchange Commission? What exactly are they doing in terms of collecting all of this data about people's personal finances?
Yes, well, I'm happy to explain it. That is a very deceptively boring title for what is, in fact, a new mass surveillance program. This involves the Securities and Exchange Commission, which, as you know, is involved with regulating securities. They're charged with things like stocks, bonds, regulating broker-dealers, the stock market, how major companies disclose information. It sounds like very business section stuff. But this matter, which we consider a new important matter, now affects every ordinary investor. That is, people who invest for their kids' college, people who invest for retirement, 401ks, and so forth. And that is, the SEC has taken it on itself to appoint itself to the role of a surveillance agency over more than 100 million ordinary investors.
Is this for national security purposes, for against money laundering for terrorists and that sort of thing?
That is a great question. In fact, that is not the main argument. The main argument is kind of for order in the securities markets and to be able to search more efficiently for possible violations of the law. So what this national database does is every stock transaction in any stock exchange in the United States is stored in this national database now, which is something entirely new, along with your name, so that they can look and see Lawrence O'Connor, let's see what he's purchased in the last X years, and they know everything you've bought. And so it's a big change because traditionally the SEC has not had a direct relationship with ordinary investors unless they have reason to investigate a possible violation. They had to go through these constitutional procedures, right? They had to have a reason to say, we get to investigate in this area. Now they just scoop everything up, and your information, if you've invested for your kids' college or for a 401k, is in this national database, and the government can apply these sophisticated analytical techniques to look for possible violations of the law. So it reverses the way things have worked constitutionally since our founding, which is you can't just, without suspicion, just sweep through information or other sources and just collect information and go through it at your convenience. So it's a major change, and it's important for a couple of reasons. But it's a huge change for the SEC, and the SEC took it on itself. Congress didn't do this. The SEC appointed itself to this role.
Well, Andrew, I was going to ask a follow-up question. No, of course. I mean, where does it get the powers to do this? It seems like another example of federal regulatory overreach, overzealous agencies taking advantage of whatever Congress did not delegate to them and trying to regulate what they should not be. And then the implications. I mean, if let's say they have this collection of all of this data tracking where our money is being invested. What's to stop them from then starting to target, from a political lens or an ideological lens, individuals who are invested in companies they don't agree with or don't support the mission of? I mean, we've seen that when it comes to donors to charitable organizations. So that's a two-parter: the overreach and then the implications.
Yes, no, you're doing all my work for me. We should get you on our briefs. Those are great points. Both that this is part of a disturbing pattern, which is now well established, where federal agencies who have an important role and a lot of smart people, and Congress has charged the SEC with some very important functions, but they don't include surveillance of ordinary investors. And we've seen some of these cases, of course, in the last several years that you all are familiar with, where OSHA decided it was going to get involved with vaccine mandates. When everyone thinks of vaccines, OSHA is a workplace safety. The Supreme Court struck that down. Centers for Disease Control getting involved with policy for rental, home and apartment rental.
Yes,
and the Supreme Court said, no, you're Centers for Disease Control. So this is that same kind of pattern where agencies are not elected. This kind of step denies us the ability to affect policy by talking to our representatives, because the agencies get instructions from Congress. So you're exactly right. That's a problem that is widespread and in a lot of areas. We could talk about that for hours.
Well, and we also see,
and just seizing power.
And the IRS has illegally, people at the IRS have illegally leaked tax data that's supposed to be private on individuals for political purposes. Anything that the government is holding can be illegally leaked and used as a weapon for political purposes, because we know they do it. They've done it before. This seems like a clear constitutional violation. This is Fourth Amendment stuff. This is seizure of people's private information without a warrant. Why is there even a question here that this shouldn't be struck down by some judge saying, no, SEC, you can't do that?
Well, that is our view, and the view of, we're not alone, and the view of a number of knowledgeable and experienced commentators and observers, that it's a Fourth Amendment and also a First Amendment violation for some of the reasons that Patrice flagged, in that we have a right of association without the government collecting information on everybody we donate to or choose to invest in. And you're exactly right, particularly in this era of whole of government approach, where every agency is supposed to help with, whether it's climate or here are other kinds of issues. Agencies get outside their lane, and it doesn't have to be this administration. You can conceive of a world where some other party is in control of Washington, and they also will have this data to look at unfavored people. And as you indicate, look and see, we don't like Jane Doe. Let's see what kind of industry she's invested in. Does she like green? Does she not like green? Is she right to life? Is she pro-choice? Let's see what her investment portfolio shows.
Does she own oil stocks, cigarette companies, gun manufacturers? Absolutely. This is what's done. Andrew Morris, thanks for bringing this to our attention. This goes into full effect like at the end of this week.
It's been... Yes, it finally comes into, the last piece comes into place, but it's been ramping up for about 4 years. So it's been as these things happen. It's it's the largest database outside the NSA, apparently, although experts disagree. It's a massive database. So it's taken years to get it online, but it's been coming online for about the last 4 years. Absolutely. Pleasure to talk to you.
Goodness.
You'll see some success
Thank you so
on
much.
that. Yes, and once again, the organization there is the new Civil Liberties Alliance. They actually care about civil liberties, not like the ACLU. 745. Hey, Patrice, you know how local school systems are constantly putting up initiatives to try to root out the hate and the racism and anti-Semitism and bullying that might be
Raise a
fostered
fist.
in
Yes.
their yes, absolutely. Changing names because the school is named after a plantation from 250 years ago, that sort of thing. They look so hard to find it. Well, we found some hate, we found some anti-Semitism. It's right there in the yearbook for Gainesville High School in Prince William County, down in Gainesville. In the yearbook, they have a full 2-page spread featuring the Palestine rally and the speakers that spoke there. And the speakers are, well, they're Jew-hating anti-Semites. So there you go. We found maybe they should do something about that instead of worrying about, naming a school after a Civil War hero.
I love at Nova_campaigns on X.com. They have here the spread, and then it's a quote. If you are not careful, the news will have you hating the people who are being oppressed with the Palestine flag and loving the people, the Jewish flag or Israel flag, doing the oppressing. So it is just reinforcing this idea that don't trust the news. The Palestinians are the ones who are being oppressed, and the Jews are the ones who are oppressors. Thereby, you need to be vigilant and virulent and violent against Jews. I mean, it's just despicable.
I'm curious if there's anything in the yearbook acknowledging the terror attacks of October 7th and maybe some of the Jewish students who were affected by that, and maybe condolences for the... Yeah, no, it's just the Palestine rally. Because you see the promoters of so-called Palestine and Hamas, all these protesters, if you boil it down, they've got one message, and that is... After October 7th and the slaughter and rape and decapitation of over 1,200 innocent people and the continued sexual assault and imprisonment of hostages, the terrorists need to be rewarded. We need to rally around their flag, celebrate what they did, and reward them for their malicious, violent, bloodthirsty attacks. That's what Gainesville High School in their yearbook is celebrating here. And I don't know, if I was a parent with a kid in that school, might make a phone call today, have a conversation.
They're celebrating the radicalism, the radicalism of young people. These kids, if they strap a bomb to themselves and blow something up next school year, I wonder what the response is going to be then. God forbid that happens.
They're making little martyrs
but
out
I'm
of
just
them.
saying.
7:53.